Well, welcome to Voices of the Valley. It's a part of the Valley Hoops Insider podcast and website. We like to bring the people on that report the games, announce the games, all that to our website. And on the screen there, you can see Jeff Bidwell. He is next to me on the screen. Jevin Redman down below. Jeff is with the Murray State Racers. Jevin with the Evansville Purple Aces. That might be hard to announce tomorrow. Aces and Racers. I bet one of you will trip at some particular point. Appreciate you guys both being on with us. First of all, Jevin, tell us, how long you've been with Evansville, what kind of capacities you work there with the Purple Aces.
Yeah, so this is my 7th year as far as broadcasting games with our Learfield property. It was established my first year back in 2018, and I just called the games for the first handful of years. In the last 2 years, I've been in-house part-time doing some content stuff, handling the coaches' shows, podcasts, other social media recordings, and just more coverage of our basketball and baseball team. So 7th year calling the game. This is my 2nd year in a part-time role doing some content stuff.
That's cool that they dragged you in a little bit, to the family a little bit deeper. And Jeff, how about for you? And tell us about your website and all of that as well.
Well, I've been around this team since 2002, but I, did it through the TV lens. Was the sports anchor here in Paducah for 20 years and retired from the TV world in 2022, and now this is year number 2 as the radio voice, following the great Neil Bradley, who had this seat for 30 years, and also on the side, the racerbasketball.com, which is it's a little bit of a misnomer because it's probably 90% Murray State, but still 10% Valley. Just keeping our eyes on everything for both the men's and women's side. So it's a lot of racers all the time, and couldn't love it anymore.
Yeah, we won't talk about the women's side too much, just because there's so much to cover. But Caitlin Young is doing some marvelous things.
Amazing stuff.
Super excited to have you guys on. What's it like, Jevin? You've had a couple of different head coaches while you've been there. What's it like being the broadcaster working with the head coach?
Yeah, obviously it's a close relationship, especially in season. You're with the team throughout all the road trips, and you host the coaches' shows. You're always talking to the head coach before and after the game. So very, very close during basketball season. I will say in my time here, I've been very lucky with the coaches that I've worked, whether it's with basketball or baseball, that we've gotten along. We've had that close relationship, whether it be in the job or also outside the job. And head coach David Ragland's in his 3rd season. The longest head coach that I worked with in my time at Evansville had that short stint to where we had about 3 coaches in about a year and a half span. So Coach Ragland's done a great job with the program. We've seen improvement each and every year. And this is a talented group, especially with their starting 5. Haven't had a whole lot of depth this year, but Coach Ragland has certainly taken the program in the right direction. He's been absolutely wonderful to work for.
I'm such a big fan of both of these guys, but you too, Jeff, that relationship, it's an important one, isn't it? To cultivate, to mature, and not be all the way sucked into it.
Yeah, there has to be a little bit of a separation of church and state, but at the same time, my relationship with Steve Prohm, goes back almost 20 years now, from the time he came with Billy Kennedy back in the summer of 2006, when he was an assistant coach for 4 years. And we didn't have it was a hi, how are you kind of thing, back then. But then as he grew into the head coaching job from 2011 to 2015, and obviously Murray State had that, amazing run and getting at the top 10 of the country and all that. And, we had a very good professional relationship. But then when he left to go to Iowa State, our relationship shifted a little bit, where now, I felt more comfortable not being friendly, but being a little more of a friend and, reaching out, hey, great win tonight. Hey, I know you're struggling, keep your chin up, that type of stuff. And then, so when he came back, it was a different relationship. And now certainly being, as I described, being on the radio, you even covering the program for 20 years, just being with the team, on the bus, at meals, meetings, practices all the time. It's like you're in the United Nations now, but I'm not in the Security Council. There are certain levels to this, and that is fine. That's sort of, again, that separation you need to have to try to still cover the team on some level. But Stephen and my relationship is certainly, decades here in the making.
And then Jeff, how hard is it to be objective on your podcast, in the broadcast, because you're linked to the team? And sure. I've been the voice of various teams throughout the years, and my perspective is always from the perspective of the team.
Right.
And yet your listeners want you to tell them the truth. Talk about the balance between objectivity and being a homer, and you need to be a homer, and so does Jevin.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I think part of it's just personality driven. Like if you want to just go be mad about things, there's plenty of places in this world you can go air those grievances and just find negativity and anger. So that's, and when things are struggling, I mean, I think the part of it is it's maybe just sometimes the words you use and sort of the tone you take. But I'm also, coming from a journalism background, I'm not going to tell you when things are going bad, that the sky is green. And I need you to believe me, because then when the sky eventually turns blue, I need you to believe me then too. So, sure, I could sit up here and, boy, we got beat and we stunk tonight and this and that. Well, we're not, we struggled, we scuffle a little bit tonight. Sometimes it's just verbiage as much as anything, but I try to be honest, and I think the part that I think the part about the access that I have, which I hope is a positive to listeners and such, whether it's on the radio or with the podcast, website, whatever, is that I have a more educated stance on things. Like I know why things happen, as opposed to just being on the outside. Like, well, this didn't go well, and this is why I think. And as we know, we don't know anything. It's like these guys are on such a higher level of thinking and planning and work and all that. So to be able to have just a little more, just the conversations of, okay, I get this, I understand. Let me try to explain why this happened. It may not settle folks down, but at least, try to provide a little more information to it.
Jevin, same question, but I want to add to it about objectivity versus being not a cheerleader, but you know what I mean. You're on the Purple Aces side of this. I want to throw in an additional wrinkle. I saw Coach Redman. Coach Ragland the other day. You and I were at Indiana State at the same time, and their record isn't near as good as a year ago. But I maintain that the Purple Aces are better this year than they were a year ago. So talk about that objectivity question, and then and then tell me if you agree with my summation of the Purple Aces.
Yeah, I'll start with this year's group with Evansville. I agree, and I think the biggest difference last year versus this year is there was more depth on last year's team. And also their starting five coming in had way more college minutes than what this year's group did. So it took some time to get those guys established. I think about Tayshawn Comer playing with a new group, even though he had 2 years of college basketball experience. Connor Turnbull had 2 years at Butler, but didn't really play a whole lot, only 9 games last year because of an injury. You've got Gabriel Pizzato, who is uber talented, but again, he's a freshman coming to the States from Italy. So you had a lot that had to kind of work through the non-conference. Plus, they had a tougher non-conference schedule this year than versus last year. So I actually talked with Jeff moments before coming on this, and I said, really, I think this team is more indicative of their conference record. They're probably around a 500, maybe even slightly better team in terms of talent. 6 or 12 losses have been by 6 points or fewer. So you cut those in half, all of a sudden you're an 11-win Valley team talking being a 4, 5, or 6 seed. So I feel like this team is better than what their overall record speaks for. And again, they just had to go through that first month and a half to where they were kind of banged up with injuries, a tough road non-conference schedule, and a lot of guys playing together for the first time with that many college minutes. That was what was different versus last year. To answer your question kind of about, being a homer on the radio or having that objectivity, I'll be honest with you, I've kind of changed the last few years how I've approached that just in terms of my delivery on the air. I think the first few years I came in and I was a little more 50-50 down the middle. I kind of called the game just like a broadcaster. And as you get more established in the community, I'm from the Evansville area, but, with the team and the athletic department and whatnot, you have more of an invested interest in the games, right? So I feel like in terms of my delivery, it's shifted more so to kind of 65-35 in terms of energy levels. I want people to know, hey, this is an Evansville broadcast. He's pro UE. He wants them to win. But kind of like Jeff said, I want my word to have some credibility to it. And I will say, being a basketball official, doing a lot of high school basketball and some, college women's as well, I feel like I have more of an understanding of kind of what goes into that. And I'm a bit more selective in terms of commenting about the officiating. That way, when I do, people kind of value, oh, Jevin is saying something. It must be bad or it must have been a missed call. The one thing I definitely avoid as far as being a homer, I'm not going to go on the air and feel like, oh, that official, this crew is out to get Evansville. Hey, sometimes you miss calls. It's not that they dislike you or anything. You just miss calls and you move on. So I've always kind of approached that of, if I feel like there was a missed call against Evansville, I'll address it, and then we move on. We're not going to stay on it for the whole game. So that's kind of been my approach. I'm kind of 65-35 in terms of energy levels. I've always felt, too, if Evansville is just getting kicked on the road, they're down 15 points or whatnot, I still owe it to the listeners to, try to be energetic. This might be their entertainment for the day or kind of their escape from their everyday life. They enjoy Aces basketball on TV or the radio. So I still think I owe it to the broadcast to be energetic, to still be invested and not just mope because my team's down 15 points.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like I said, I've done a number of different kinds of things. I think you have to bring that and bring it from your team's perspective. Getting to, you guys play 6 o'clock Thursday against one another in the first round of the MVC tournament and split the regular season games, both teams winning at home and both games being close. Jeff, what do you recall about those games? And one of them was like about 5 years ago in the first week of December.
Yeah.
But what do you take from those games? What did you learn about what Murray has to do to defeat Evansville?
Holy shnikes. Yeah, the December game, all I really remember is I feel like the Racers were up 10, 12 with about 2 minutes to go. And then all of a sudden, whatever skills they had learned in terms of game management and trying to seal the deal just evaporated because it was 2 minutes of chaos. And suddenly, if I remember correctly, it's Tanner Cuff that had a 3-pointer to win it at the buzzer. And it was wild how poorly the Racers handled the Evansville pressure at the end. And suddenly a game that was in hand literally 90 seconds ago was in jeopardy. So that was, thank goodness we got out of there with that. And then, when you're in the moment, and there have been, every season's got ebbs and flows and peaks and valleys. And sometimes you think, boy, we're not playing well right now, but we can figure it out. But you get a little bit of perspective. You look back at the time we played at Evansville there at the end of January, and that was really, we were at the bottom. Like that was and no discredit to Evansville because they played out of their minds in the second half, played so well to beat us by 4. But, just to say defensively, it was a weird 2-half game. It was 25-20 at the half. The Racers went on a 17-0 run in the first half. That run took 8 minutes. Like no one felt good at the end of it. It was like, how did we only score 17 points in 8 minutes? And David Ragland's down there going, shoot, we didn't score in 8 minutes and we're down 5 and you're feeling great. And then the second half, Evansville just turned into the 2015 Warriors. I think that the number was 31 possessions, and I think they scored on 29 of them. Like, wow. It's hard to beat a team that scores every time down the floor. And, I mean, we got to witness the Gabriel Pizzato experience. We got to witness the Tayshawn Comer experience. And it was just like, I need off this ride because this team is a juggernaut right now. And, I mean, and that's the part where you're like, they scored 20 in the first half. You feel awesome. And then in the final 20, they put 58 up. And you're like, we have no answer for this. And we were playing bad. They were in their stretch because they beat us. They go down and beat Belmont. So they're playing great. And it's just, buddy, let's flip a coin at 6 o'clock on Thursday and see how this rolls. So,
Jevin, your team has so much height. So much, they're distinctly different from every other team in the Missouri Valley Conference. And I think that gives them a little bit of an edge. Obviously, their record is their record, but I think that's their strength. Talk about what the Purple Aces have to do to be successful Thursday against the Racers.
Well, I think defensively is what kind of changed Evansville's season. I just remember riding home from Ball State, the final game before Christmas. They were 3-9 and got beat by 40-ish points by really not very good Ball State team. So I'm kind of riding home thinking, I'm not sure how many Valley games this team's going to win if this continues. Now, I knew at the time Pizzato was hurt, and they had 2 guys also playing through some injuries that the public didn't know about. So it was just really a tough time. But I think what flipped was their defense. You look at some of the numbers in terms of opponents' field goal percentage and also points given up per game in the Valley. It's top 3 in both those categories. And large part is because the rim protectors with Connor Turnbull and Josh Hughes. I'm amazed at the ability that Turnbull has to cover so much ground and protect the rim. His block shot he had, Harry, in the Indiana State game that kept Evansville in front by 2, I think it was inside of a minute, is one of his more impressive blocks of the season. But I think what that's done has allowed guys in the perimeter to increase their on-ball pressure, like a Tayshawn Comer. I think he's one of the better defenders in the league. And, Gabriel was out on the wing. Cam Hafner, when he was healthy, was guarding well on-ball defense. So just their ability to protect the rim, I think, has helped this team quite a bit. And defensively is what's changed the season. As far as the game on Thursday, I agree with Jeff. It's really a coin flip. I mean, both those games were thrilling games, came down to the wire. they've had a hard time containing Jacoby Wood, as a lot of Valley teams have. But Wood had 2 20-plus point games. He had 21 in the first meeting, 29 in the second meeting. They've got to find a way to keep him more so at his average. I think if they do that, then Evansville has a decent chance to win the game. But if he goes for, again, 20, 25-plus points, I think the Aces have a hard time keeping pace with Murray State just because of their limited depth and having to rely so much on their starting 5.
The defensive, and to start to jump in, Harry, the defensive decision that David Ragland and his staff made in that second game was Nick Ellington's not beating us. We've got all this size. We've got undersized bigs as it is, but they just decided we're packing it in, and you guys want to take threes, have fun. And Racers took 36 threes, which going back, it was like the most in like 10 years. Like, it was a wildly big number, and they only made 12, which, 33% is not terrible when you're taking that many. And the thing was, they were open, but they were sort of, kind of reached that point of, fellas, you're open for a reason, because they're just letting you shoot and you're not making any. And that is part of the puzzle that has to get solved on Thursday, whether they've got to figure out a way to get it inside against all that size and try to score around the rim, or somebody's just going to have to make some shots, because if it's going to turn into another 35, 40-point three-point effort, if the Racers don't make 16, 17, 18, it's going to be a long night.
Yeah,
I will say real quick, just to kind of build off that, as far as the Evansville defense, there's really 2 games that stand out in terms of the coaching staff's philosophy. Is, hey, there's some guys we're just going to flat out not guard, and if they hit shots, then we tip our cap. The Drake game, they kind of gave a new wrinkle. It's almost like a triangle and 2 type of defense. They just put the 2 bigs in the paint and said, hey, you're not going to guard your guys, you're going to protect the rim, and then we'll increase our on-ball defense up top. And that gave Drake some fits, and Evans almost pulled out an upset win. The other game was the SIU home game. It was the Aces had won 3 straight games going into that. SIU was last in terms of 3-point percentage. The Aces really just packed it in and let SIU shoot from the perimeter. The unfortunate thing is SIU got hot. They made, I think, 10 threes in the first half. I think 16 plus for the game. And so really those 2 games were noticeable as, there's going to be some matchups where the Evansville coaching staff is okay with so-and-so beating them. And if they do, you tip your cap.
I think it's so interesting. I asked Steve Prohm a couple of days ago. I said, you guys pulling out the brooms to practice leading up to this one because of the tall players. But to your point, I asked Coach Ragland about that the other day because, we were talking and he said, look, at Arch Madness, people don't make threes very easily.
Right.
In that building, people don't make threes like they normally do. And so if we can defend the paint with our big guys, man, we've got a chance against anybody. And I think that's going to be a very interesting study during your guys' game at 6:00 on Thursday. So I want to take you to a different kind of a realm. You're the broadcaster, and I know I've been like a broadcaster with a team, and you can kind of live and die with the team a little bit too. How confident, Jeff Bidwell, is Jeff Bidwell in the trip to St. Louis? How confident is the coaching staff, and how confident are the fans?
It's been a roller coaster year, and it has been, look, this team went to Drake and won. 4 days later, they went to Northern Iowa and won. They went to Peoria 2 weeks ago and probably should have beat Bradley, and they lose in overtime. This team also, went to Missouri State and lost. And it is what are we getting tonight? And I think that's ultimately the part that kind of tempers optimism. I mean, look, I'll tell you this. My glass is most generally 90% full on all days. It's like this, it ain't over. I mean, look, last year we were 12-20 and I packed 4 ties because I'm like, we're going to play Sunday. We're going to play out. And we scored 35 points on Thursday and went home very quickly. So, that happens. But it is, I am firmly in the camp of, it's all on the table. It is all on the table. This team, when they come out and just play with their hair on fire, they can beat anybody. And they have shown they can beat anybody. They have also shown they can lose to anybody. And to me, that's the league this year. I mean, you go talk to Drake about going to Missouri State twice and needing overtime twice against that. I mean, it's like everybody can beat everybody. Everybody can lose to everybody. And I think that's kind of the overriding umbrella of this whole tournament that, and it's probably going to end up being Drake and Bradley on Sunday just because it's supposed to. But if you want chaos, I mean, I feel like if ever there was a year, this is really it, because there are so many good teams in this league this season.
Yeah, Jevin, your confidence, the coaching staff's confidence, and the fans' level of confidence?
Well, I know the coaching staff is extremely confident because they feel like they have very talented starting five, and they've had some close calls not go their way this year. So I know they're very confident heading over. I think the fans are cautiously optimistic because they see that talent there. In terms of my viewpoint, I feel like, kind of like Jeff said, I feel like Evansville can beat any given team on any given night. The one concern I have, if I'm going to be fair, is can they win 4 games in 4 days with basically 5 players because they've got nothing from the bench, and that obviously wears on you. So I think you have to block that out and really just take it, not to be cliche. I kind of hate this answer, but you take it one game at a time. You don't think we got to win four games in 4 days. Find a way to beat Murray State. Hey, that's possible. Then if you win, we got to find a way to beat Bradley. We only lost by 4 or 6 points the first meeting. We can do that. So you take it one step at a time. But again, I think it's going to be a very entertaining conference tournament. I know we say that a lot, each and every year, but there's really not that dominant force that's an automatic, hey, they're in the championship game. I will say, I think the bottom half of the bracket, I told Jeff this earlier, I didn't really think there was a big difference in terms of who Evansville played the first night, but I think the bottom half of the bracket is a tougher path to get the championship or win it because, all right, if Evansville beats Murray State, then you get Bradley and then probably Northern Iowa, and then you'd have to probably beat Drake. I feel like that path is much more difficult than the top half. And I don't know about you guys, but the one matchup I want to see on Saturday in terms of really seeing an upset to take down Drake, I think Belmont can give them fits because of their offensive ability. They can make it a higher possession game, which Drake doesn't want. So I think if Drake is going to go down for the championship, I could see Belmont getting them.
I said that people don't make threes at the Enterprise Center, but I'm telling you, Belmont has done some offensive damage in that building. They have been really spectacular a couple of different times. I'll let you go in just 1 or 2 more questions. And Jevin, I think I already know the answer. The trajectory of the program in Evansville, to me, it seems all positive. Obviously, big programs are coming shopping around Gabriel Pizzato, every day. And so retaining players is difficult. But the trajectory seems to be in the right direction with the right kinds of things going on. And you talked about depth. If Cam Hafner doesn't go out, maybe you guys are a little bit more dangerous this weekend as well. But talk about the trajectory of the Purple Aces program.
Yeah, I feel better about the program today than I did, I think, on this day last year. I feel like this group is more talented than last season. Obviously, not the experience that we touched on. But obviously the concern is retention. And I've talked with Coach Reagan about this on the air and also off the air. He feels good about keeping this core of 5, the starting 5 together. Obviously that can change in the offseason. We don't know what all is going behind the scenes, and I'm not going to get too into the weeds on this, but I know they're making quite a bit of progress in terms of NIL and contributions and whatnot than where they were at last year, because that was a major concern. So I feel better in that category moving forward. And this is a group that theoretically everybody can come back. Obviously, that's not going to be the case. You're going to have a few guys that leave every year. But I think if they can keep the starting 5 intact or 4 of the 5 and get a couple of guys that come off the bench, I think this team can be probably more advanced than what they were this year. Because you look at last year, they went 10-2 in the non-conference part of their schedule, and they finished with 17 total wins. So the second half of the season wasn't really all that promising. And I said going in, I remember sitting with Scott Schroeder doing a podcast back in October, and we both shared that we thought this team would struggle in the non-conference but win more games in the Valley, and that is what happened. They went 8-12, had some close calls to where they're really not too far from being a 4 or 5 seed. We thought 5 was their ceiling. We kind of predicted 7th or 8th. So the season really kind of played out how I anticipated. But I do feel better now than I did at the end of last season.
And Jeff, I think it's very different in Murray, Kentucky. What I mean is you have a very vocal, demanding fan base, and talk about the trajectory of the program, maybe in light of what people's expectations are in Murray.
The expectations are always going to be sky high. You ever walked in that building and you just kind of look up top, you see a whole lot of banners and a whole lot of championships and a whole lot of retired jerseys with some, NBA draft picks that are not from the black and white days. There is
the black and white days.
We got some great players from back in the 40s and 50s that, the only thing everybody knows about them is they see their jersey hanging up there. Sure. But everybody knows about Isaiah Cannon and Cameron Payne and John Morant. That, it's like, it's still within arm's reach in the recent past. So, I think in terms of the trajectory of the program, and I think I could say this about 360 programs around the country, the trajectory of everyone's program right now in the landscape that we are in is, what is your infrastructure? How is the infrastructure set up around name, image, and likeness. Because the bottom line is, no matter what happens this week, we are likely losing 5 seniors that all started. And so now we're starting over. It's just, it is so hard now to build programs and to have, that's really what, to what Brian Wardle's done at Bradley and how, whether it's circumstance, however it's happened, to have guys that have been there for multiple years to be able to have some sort of continuity is just such a luxury nowadays. And so it's just, in the best of times, hey, we've won and guys graduated, we got to start over. Hey, we've got great players that other people want and they come poach them and we're starting over. And so there's kind of this annual reset button, but you have to have the infrastructure behind it now so you can get players, so you can retain, do your best to retain your best guys. And I think that's the most important part. And from a Murray State perspective, where their NIL was they walked into the league this is the 3rd year now in the Valley. 3 years ago, there wasn't anything. I mean, there was just nothing. Last year, it was bare. The wheels were just finally this is really the first year that it's rolling, and it's going to continue to grow. Nico Yanko, our athletic director, and his staff and everybody. I mean, they are the collective going. They're building it, and they're trying to this house settlement. And there's the goalposts move every week and
every day.
College sports right now. But to me, that's the trajectory to worry about because we can go to the Final Four this year. Awesome. It's going to be all different next year. It's just everything. There's so little continuity from year to year, and the old timer in me, it kind of stinks, but it's the way it is, and you just have to survive or get left behind and thrive and grow and all that, or get left behind. And I think the Murray State program is doing a good job of that.
So predict the game for me, Jevin. Not wins or loss, but score range. Like, what's it going to be like Thursday when those two play? Is this going to be a low-scoring game, or is it going to be a game that gets, or does one pace, provide something better for one of the teams?
Well, I think both teams are in a similar perspective of it's been a roller coaster year at times, so you're never really sure what team's going to hit the floor Thursday in St. Louis. But my gut tells me 70 is kind of the magic number. But then you think about teams don't shoot all that well, as you guys mentioned over at Arch Madness. So maybe the game is in the 60s. So I'd kind of put it between 65 and 70. I think for Evansville, as I mentioned, the key is going to be slow down Jacoby Wood, and then if they do force Murray State to beat them from the perimeter, limit them to just one opportunity. Offensive rebounds have always been a problem against Murray State because they've been more physical than Evansville teams in the past. And I felt like Evansville did match their physicality better in the first 2 meetings this year, but still they gave up 9 offensive rebounds in the first game and 16 in the second game. So they're going to cut that down, contain Jacoby Wood, and I think if they do that, they'll have a decent chance.
Jeff, the pace of play, who does it favor, and what are you thinking is going to happen?
Well, like I said, 5 weeks ago when these two met in Evansville, we saw both games. We saw a game in the 50s and we saw a game in the 100s. Just depended on when you walked out, which half you came and sat down. And I really think 70 is probably a good number. I mean, these are two teams that if I don't have my sheet in front of me, I think the bottom 2 3-point shooting teams in the league in conference play. And again, just the challenges of playing in the big arena. You never know how that's gonna go. I mean, I think pace is important for the racers. It's kind of it's been a misnomer all year. All the the Ken Palms and the tempo guys where it's like the racers are a slow team. I don't think that's necessarily how they play, but the numbers ultimately end up being the numbers. But I think when the racers are at their best, they're going downhill. I think if they can get downhill, that's important, because if this is going to turn into a half-court game and you're trying to navigate around, 6'7" Pizzato and 6'6" Cuff and 6'11" this and 6'11" that, it's like this is not our game. And then it turns into a jump shooting game, and that gets a little bit concerning. So, I think if it can get to the 70s, I feel okay. But, the last game got to the 70s and things didn't go well either. So it's just if you watched, it was disappointing on Sunday on national TV down in Belmont in Nashville. And again, a tale of two halves. Down 41-22 at the half. You're down 19, and the Racers got it back to 3 because they just played with the, and it's such the coach cliche, but it's just the relentless effort. We need relentless effort. And there was not that. It was just a very passive performance, and they got their tails kicked in the first half. And then they played hard in the second. And hey, look what happened. But it was just the hole was too big. So if the effort is there and the fight is there, and you would just hope for everybody, and you assume it's we got to win or we're done, and so that it's going to be the same for the fellas in purple down at the other end. And so you have to match it. And so I don't know. I feel like I'm talking in circles, trying to talk myself into good things happening here. Whoever's going to score the most is going to win. But
there you go.
If it gets into a grinder, I'm worried that that's now just a real half-court game that the size that Evansville is going to present can really be a problem.
Final question, Jevin. Over under on Connor Turnbull dunks and blocks.
Set it at, he's averaging 2 blocks a game. I'm going to set it at 4.
Oh gosh, gee whiz. Of course, you guys had 9, I think, the first time we played. So that's not. That's not.
I tell you what. I'm gonna leave it at 5. We'll go 5.
There you go.
Yeah.
I love that. It seems like about a third of the times they just come across half court and think, I'll just throw it at the rim and hope somebody catches it and flushes it.
So it's funny. I asked Tayshawn Comer a few weeks ago on our coaches show because he had a big play there in Belmont down the stretch where he lobbed Turnbull, caught it and dunked. I was like, hey, what all goes into those reads? And he said, well, sometimes it's not a read. I just throw it up there and let him go catch it because he can jump higher than everyone else. So, right. Hopefully that's on display Thursday. Yeah.
Such a weapon. Jeff Bidwell, he's the voice of the Murray State Racers. Jevin Redman, he is the voice of the Evansville Purple Aces. They tip it up against each other 6 p.m. Thursday here in St. Louis at Arch Madness. Gentlemen, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Harry.
Thanks, Harry.
Appreciate your time for watching as well. Remember, since you've been there, make it a better place. We'll see you again real soon.